Well, good afternoon to you. It's now 5:06, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-WMAL. Be good to have you with us. It is the first day of early voting in the Commonwealth of Virginia in what is shaping up to be a very close election, certainly at the presidential level. But we're also looking down ballot and seeing quite a bit of success among the Republican candidates who seem to be doing very well right now. Earlier this week in Virginia's 7th Congressional District, in the race to replace the outgoing Democrat Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, there was a forum held in the 7th between the Democrat Eugene Vindman, famously of the Vindman clan, you know, the let's impeach Trump by making up stuff. Let's mock when there's an assassination attempt on him. You know, those guys. It was between Eugene Vindman and Republican Derrick Anderson. And during that forum, there was some conversation, as you might expect, about the border. And Eugene Vindman was saying, well, that so-called bipartisan legislation that was presented earlier this year, which would, of course, only codify the border crisis, well, that was the solution. We should have done that. And a constituent in the 7th shouts out, well, why didn't you do something about this years ago, you Democrats? Why didn't the Democrats fix this years ago? And listen to how he treats his own constituent. Take a listen here. Stand by. Here it is.
They don't have the power of law. What was proposed in the spring was a law that would have fixed the problem permanently. So what he's saying is not true. Be quiet, I'm talking.
That's one of your constituents. I'm not rude.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the advice. In any case,
Be quiet, he yells. He'd like to be the congressman so he can wield even more power over his constituents. Joining me now to discuss that bizarre moment is Derrick Anderson, the Republican nominee now running for Congress in Virginia's 7th. Derrick, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, good evening, Vince. Thanks for having me, brother. Always a pleasure.
So crazy to hear that. Normally, they wait till they have power to treat their constituents like garbage. Eugene Vindman's not waiting, is he?
No, and Vince, what was fascinating, and you probably heard it in the background when he screamed at one of our voters, one of our people, the people home to 7. I looked at him. I said, "That's one of our people. You need to respect him." And he flippantly, obviously, said, "Thanks for the advice." I mean, this is the kind of person we're dealing with, Vince. If that is not representative of who he would be, I mean, he'll be a far left radical member of Congress. The guy literally cares only about himself. I mean, that's the fact of the matter here. Look, he's focused on his past. He's got a revenge tour against President Trump, and we could go into the comments that his sister-in-law made on Sunday evening regarding the second assassination attempt against President Trump. But the guy literally is focused solely on his past and this revenge tour against President Trump and trying to remedy the Biden-Harris failed policies. Well, we were up there, Vince. We were talking about the future. We were talking about how we could fix our economy so that the average Virginia family isn't paying $1,100 a month. We were talking about how a quarter of Virginians right now are delinquent on their credit card bills because they're buying gas and groceries. We were talking about the fact that about 35% of people in Virginia are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
So we talked about how we were going to fix those problems. He didn't. Instead, he screamed at a constituent. We talked about the border issues. And what was interesting about that exchange is as you mentioned, Vince, he tried to go down the road of this bipartisan bill. And I looked him and the 10th Congressional District nominee, the Democrat nominee, in the face. I said, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could fix this right now, but they won't. They've failed at the border. They failed at the economy. They failed on our foreign policy, which we didn't talk about. But, this is what we have. This guy literally is focused on his past, and he only cares for himself. And look, I'm the homegrown guy. I'm the guy from Spotsylvania County. I grew up here, so I took specific anger with him on that when he was yelling at people from my district, my home district, and this guy had the nerve to do it.
So I guess he's comfortable just being known as the Trump derangement syndrome candidate, because that really is the defining feature of his public career here, whether it's being a part of trying to manufacture an impeachment of President Trump or his sister-in-law. This was crazy. Right after President Trump was nearly assassinated yet again this past weekend, Rachel Vindman came out publicly and expressed on X. She said, "No ears were harmed," she said mockingly, making fun of President Trump's prior injuries. "Carry on with your Sunday afternoon." Did Eugene Vindman ever react to this? Did this come up at all in the candidate forum? Did he ever account for his family's behavior?
No, Vince. And so a little bit more on that story. So I was in downtown Fredericksburg when this all went down. And, you read the comments from my opponent, Yevgeny Vindman's sister-in-law. And then we asked my opponent to denounce it. And instead of denouncing it, his sister-in-law doubled and tripled down on the comments. And then his brother started to attack me. I mean, if this does not give the people in the 7th District an idea, I mean, they truly only care about themselves. I mean, they do not have they're totally out of touch. He is totally out of touch with this district. So again, this is my home district. This is where the district that raised me. So, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we win this seat so that we can get back to common sense and get things more affordable, get our communities safe, take care of our veterans, try to fix 95, which is a disaster today, right now, actually. But, Vince, that's what we're looking at right now, and that's what we're focused on. And it's truly disheartening to see how he's treated people in the 7th, the fact that he has no plan. When we were up on that forum stage, there was a lot of him talking about the past, reading from a giant binder. He brought a giant binder up on the stage. And I looked at him at the end of the forum and I told him, look, you can read from a binder all night long, but I actually care about the people here in the 7th because my mom's here, my cousins are here, my family, kids that I went to elementary through high school here. And he began to smirk at me and I told him, you can smirk all you want, but I actually care about these people. So it's important, Vince. Early voting started today, as you mentioned earlier. It is important for people to get out and vote. And when you go vote, grab 4 or 5 of your friends, your coworkers, anyone that you can, because we have to win this seat to keep our majority and get our country back on track.
Yeah, that's for sure. Tell me about your experience with early voting today. Give me a better sense of it. And what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, Vince. So we started the morning out in Greene County, so the furthest west, one of the more western counties in our district. So we started in Greene County, went to Orange County, went to Culpeper County, and then went to Spotsylvania. And I can tell you, Greene County, out in the western part of our district, had a line out the door of about 20 people deep outside of the Greene County office. I mean, that was at 9:15 this morning. It was amazing to see. And then we had our tent set up across the street, and all those voters that were coming in and voting walked right over our tent, shook our hands, and said, let's do this thing. And I'll tell you, whether it was in Greene County, whether it was in Orange County, whether it was in Culpeper County, Culpeper was wild. They had a whole bunch of people on the side of the street with the entire ticket signs waving them. There's about 15 people, and people are going up and down Main Street honking their horns. It was awesome to see. But I'll tell you, when voters are coming in, after they came back out, they shook my hand, and the two things they said is, we're feeling it right now. We're feeling it, Derrick. Everyone's feeling the pinch, Vince. I mean, everyone's feeling it in their pocketbooks, and I think that's what people are going into this election looking at is, was I better off 4 years ago than I am today? And so, look, I mean, this comes down to dollar and cents. It's about putting food on the table, and I think that right now they see what we're talking about. While, again, my opponent, he just keeps talking about his past. He talks about just the fact that all he talks about is the former President Donald Trump. That's all he talks about. Where, again, we're focused on the future, and people see that, and it's going to show here in November.
Derrick, the logistics of the race, what does the money fight look like between you and Eugene Vindman? Eugene Vindman is, as a Trump derangement syndrome candidate, does have something of a national profile on the left. Does that help him at all in his fundraising?
Yeah, I'm sure it probably does, Vince. But here's the difference between him and I. We're going to be pulling voters out that arguably might have not have voted in primaries or midterms or what have you.
Right.
I think what makes me starkly different from him is I'm going to bring a voter base to this, not only from the go in and do anything. But we're bringing people out that are my cousins, are my people that I went to middle school and elementary school who might consider themselves independent voters. And they're like, okay, well, the ticket is the ticket, but I've known Anderson since he was 6 years old. I used to wrestle with him. I used to go to his mom's restaurant. So I think we're going to bring people to the table that otherwise wouldn't. And then the other side of it too, Vince, we're doing a lot of things that are free. You know, we're going to forums. We're going to on the radio. We're going out to the places that necessarily Republicans might not necessarily be favored. And we're talking to people. And when you talk to people and you start talking about kitchen table items, you're talking about things that everyone is being affected by. And look, I said this on Monday at one of our forums. I said, look, all of you are looking at me in this audience, looking at who you're going to vote for your next congressman. I will be quite frank with you. When you go to the gas station, when you go to the grocery store, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, a Democrat, a moderate, an independent. You don't get a special discount. You don't get it at the gas pump. And so at the end of the day, we need to look at common sense solutions to that problem. And being able to be out in prevalent, I mean, we were at 4 different counties today alone, Vince. You can't pay for that. You know, you can't pay for the candidate to actually be out there and hitting the pavement. I think that's really what's going to be the changing factor in this race.
And can you talk a little bit more about that get out the vote push in these days ahead of the election? Now that we're in the midst of election season, obviously I have seen as well a lot of energy at the polls today, and I hope it is sustained with each passing day of early voting. What does it take to get out the vote, to get people to actually show up to those polls?
Well, it's going to take things like this, Vince. People that are on their car ride home right now from work that are listening to the radio, they're like, early voting started already? I mean, we need to let people know. I think word of mouth is going to be huge. I encourage folks, your listeners, Vince, that are talking right now, one, they can go to our website if they have any questions. It's derrickanderson.com, that's DERRICK, anderson.com/vote, and they can find their early voting location. They can find the times and hours for their voting location. But I think the biggest thing is word of mouth. You know, when you go vote, call 10 people, text 10 people, post it on your social media. Let people know, because everyone knows what's going on at the presidential, but at the Senate and at these congressional races, you know, they're a lot more local. So folks need to post stuff on their social media, reshare stuff on social media to let them know who the candidate is that they think is going to best represent them. And that's really what's going to happen. But, I mean, I heard your show earlier, Vince. I mean, people are coming out. I think you mentioned something about maybe even being up in Fairfax or something like that.
Yeah, this morning.
What we saw today was wild. Like a line out at 9:15 early voting day 1 in Greene County. In Culpeper, you know, when we were out there, people were walking in droves to go early vote. In Orange County, the parking lot was full. I mean, this is truly impressive that I think not only are people who really want to see change, I think Republicans are comfortable with early voting now, so they're going in and voting. So, again, I can't emphasize enough that word of mouth, putting stuff on your social media, and telling folks to get out and vote is truly going to be the deciding factor, not only at the top of the ticket, but all the way down here at the congressional level. And you know, Vince, it'd be an honor. I can't say this enough, how much of an honor it would be to not only represent the 7th District, but represent the district that raised me.
It's pretty cool. Well, best of luck, as always. Derrick Anderson, we'll talk to you more as election season moves along, and thank you very much. Again, how can people get in touch with you, Derrick?
Yeah, they can go to derrickanderson.com. That's our website. If folks want to sign up to door knock, to go write postcards, to make phone calls, all of the information is on there. You can sign up to help out the campaign. We'll need everyone's help. We need all troops on deck. But we're going to keep pushing all the way through this. So we'll be door knocking pretty much every single Saturday, Vince. So if you got a Saturday you want to come down, you're more than welcome to.
All right. Make sure you wear a smartwatch or something. Track those steps, Derrick. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you today, sir. That's Derrick Anderson, Republican nominee in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. And hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:34. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful for your contributions. Let's see here. I've got Ronald Rowe, who is now the acting director of the Secret Service, after the last one had to resign in disgrace. And he is saying today, well, he's repeating a couple of lines. He did a big press conference. He released a statement on the findings that the Secret Service has obtained as they investigate the many failures around the events of July 13th, as President Trump was shot in the head from the most obvious vantage point at the entire venue in Butler, Pennsylvania. And Ronald Rowe says, well, we've been looking into this. And he has previously said the events of that day were a failure because they obviously were. He reiterates that today. But one of the very frustrating things about this press conference, to me, is that he insists that basically everything else is fine at the Secret Service. We just need Congress to give us more money. If I had to summarize today's event, it was basically that. Just give us more money. We need more resources. We're stretched so thin. Take a listen as he assesses the events of July 13th, right at the top of his remarks today.
But here are some of the findings from this mission assurance review. With respect to command and control of the site in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Secret Service has the main responsibility of building the site plan. We cannot abdicate or defer our responsibilities to others. Advanced team personnel have an obligation.
Okay, what he is saying here in his own Secret Service-y tone is local law enforcement failed us. That's what he's saying. Now, he will chalk this up to, as he does throughout the statement today, we just didn't communicate with the locals clearly enough. But there is no question what I'm hearing today is Ronald Rowe, the acting Secret Service director, passing the buck to the local law enforcement saying the reason Trump was shot was because they didn't secure the roof.
To ensure that each site meets the protective requirements and principles of Secret Service methodologies. The Secret Service did not give clear guidance or direction to our local law enforcement partners. There were communication deficiencies between law enforcement personnel at the site. For example, the Secret Service did not co-locate its security room with local law enforcement. There was an over-reliance on mobile devices, resulting in information being siloed. For example, at approximately 1810 local time,
that'd be 6:10 p.m.,
Secret Service informed personnel that local police were addressing an issue at the 3 o'clock of the outer perimeter,
which is at the AGR building. That's the 3 o'clock from the vantage point of the stage.
At approximately 1810 local time, via phone call,
the same exact time, that's 6:10 yet again,
the Secret Service security room calls the counter sniper response agent reporting an individual on the roof of the AGR building. That vital piece of information was not relayed over the Secret Service radio network.
Okay, so here's what I'm hearing there. In the room where they're passing along all this communication, it's at 6:10 specifically that they pick up the phone. A Secret Service agent picks up the phone and calls one of the counter snipers. Hey, John, what are you up to? How's the wife? Fine. Anything going on in your world? Yeah, there's a problem at 3 o'clock. Would you take a look at it? It was on the phone? This is how they're doing the communication? They were using cell phones to call each other? Sounds sophisticated.
At approximately 18:10 and 54 seconds, verified through body camera footage of local law enforcement, officers confront the assailant on the roof of the AGR building. At 18:11:05, by a phone call, the site agent calls the assistant site agent to find out what exactly is going on at the 3 o'clock, and during that call, shots ring out. At 18:11:32, verified through body camera footage, the first series of shots are fired by the assailant. At 18:11:36, again verified through body camera footage, a second series of shots are fired by the assailant. At 18:11:47, through body camera footage, Secret Service counter snipers neutralized the threat.
Okay, so the timeline he gives us here is only from 6:10 and no specific seconds, right? He says 18:10. And then he takes us all the way from then to 6:11:47. So he gives us only a less than a 2-minute window of time that he's assessing here. Now, my impression was that there was a lot of time that this guy was visible walking on a roof. Remember this? Minutes before, there's a guy walking on a roof. There are people calling out for minutes on end. He's on the roof. He's got a gun. There's all sorts of early alerts going on that are not within this tight 2-minute window, and Ronald Rowe was not particularly helpful outside of that window of time. There was a reporter who asked about the radio call that was made at 6:08. Now, remember, what time does he start with? He starts with 6:10. Ronald Rowe started with 6:10. But later in the press briefing, a reporter raised the question about what's going on at 6:08 specifically. Take a listen to this.
And then on Butler, if we can drill down on the specific timeline a little bit, at 6:08, we know that a local radio call went out that a man was on the roof. Now, my understanding is that the state police were in a separate area with locals, and their job was to communicate any local chatter to the Secret Service. Why was that 6:08 radio call not communicated to Secret Service, or was it by the state police?
So the information I have is that we had a member of the Pennsylvania State Police in our security room, and that's what spurs that phone call to the counter sniper response agent at 1810.
And so the state police never communicated a local radio call at 6:08 to the Secret Service.
What I'm saying is that the personnel that was in the security room passed that information, and that triggers the 1810 phone call.
Does that make any sense to you? Do you hear what they're saying? The locals radio in at 6:08 that they've got a man on the roof. A man on the roof. A full 2 minutes before Ronald Rowe's timeline begins, which is at 6:10. And that information triggered, this is in his words, in Ronald Rowe's words, triggered the 1810 phone call, meaning 6:10. So they get the call at 6:08. There's a man on the roof. It's not until 2 minutes later that the Secret Service calls up to the counter sniper and says, hey, there's a guy on the roof. 2 minutes later. 2 minutes later with a direct line of sight on Donald Trump. And it turns out a weapon. I have to tell you, I heard that today, and I'm screaming at my screen going, okay, somebody else ask a follow-up. Why is there a 2-minute gap in time from that command center knowing that there's a dude on the roof to the Secret Service telling the snipers about it? Why does that gap exist? Now, it may not be 2 minutes on the nose because nobody gave me seconds here. It may be shorter than that. It may be longer than that. But it sounds like at least a minute and a half of time between an indication into that command center and an actual call to the snipers, literally using a cell phone. They called him on his phone. Hey, Jack, you checked that roof. About 2 minutes ago, we got a call that there may be a dude on top of it. Does that drive you crazy? It drives me absolutely nuts that that's the case. And I was getting driven a little crazy today. Susan Crabtree is an excellent reporter over at Real Clear Politics. We've talked to her a lot about all these Secret Service scandals. I think she was yelling at her screen, too, today because she was frustrated by the lack of knowledge, understanding, or interest by some of the reporters who were in the room who were asking mindless questions in some cases. Not all. Not all. At one point, there was a woman he called on who he straight up was like, okay, you can go. They called on her, and she said, She got frazzled. She's like, I think someone else already asked my question, so you can go to somebody else. She had no question prepared. No. She didn't have a million follow-ups. Somebody had checked the box for her, so they just barreled along. That's crazy. Also, Ronald Rowe today insisted over and over and over again that Donald Trump has now the same level of protection as President Biden. That President Trump's Secret Service protection is at the same exact level. And somebody asked, well, what's the deal with, if that's the case, how is it that there was an assassin waiting in the bushes in Palm Beach at the Trump International Golf Club down there? How was that? He was asked why that spot in particular, where, what's his name, Ryan Ruth, why that guy was hiding there. Why wasn't it checked prior to Trump even getting anywhere close to it? on the golf course. Why didn't that occur? Take a listen.
On West Palm Beach, the busy public road that is adjacent to that sixth hole where the suspect was hiding is a well-known blind spot on that specific golf course. Why did no one within the U.S. Secret Service sweep behind that fence line for threats?
They were sweeping ahead, Nicole. So what I just explained is that that lead element was going ahead, sweeping.
But was there anyone behind the fence where the road was, sweeping there to see if anyone was in the bushes?
Having been there and seen the vantage point, whether they were on the public side or the private side, the bottom line is the individual was detected.
The individual was detected at a very late time. At a very late time. How long was he in the bushes? Anybody know off the top of their head? How long was that guy in the bushes? 12 hours he was camped out. The feds have already told us this. They said his cell phone signal was there for 12 hours. In fact, he was there for so long, he brought snacks with him. He had snacks there so he could set up a picnic ahead of his assassination of President Trump. So he was there for 12 hours, and they caught him at the last second. It was an advanced Secret Service agent who was doing his job, no question. But it was the final thing. It was essentially their last chance at catching this guy, other than maybe if a Secret Service agent was standing next to President Trump and had to start returning fire as the assassin began shooting. In fact, Ronald Rowe today was bragging about the young Secret Service agent who did his job, who, by the way, deserves credit for doing his job. But why did it get that far?
Who was part of the first element, whose goal was to sweep ahead, did his job. That young man is a very young agent early in his career. His vigilance, his reaction is exactly how we trained and exactly what we want our personnel to do. He identified a threat, an individual with a long gun, and he made swift decisions and took a swift action to be able to mitigate that. No shot was fired at the former president. The former president was not exposed to where he was on the golf course. And what I've said, and I said this Monday, that the procedures work, the redundancies work, so that high level of protection is working.
So this is a success? You consider this a success? He was asked at one point during the press conference, so you're not going to make any changes whatsoever? And he kind of gave the old, oh, we're constantly reviewing our protocols. How could you consider that to be a success? That it got that far, it got past every other tripwire, to the extent that you have any, that an agent a hole ahead of President Trump sees what appears to be the world's clumsiest assassin. So the guy was camped out for 12 hours, and he decided to stick the muzzle of his rifle out, not with his target in sight, but instead when a Secret Service agent was doing his advance work. So my impression based on this is that the guy was kind of clumsy in his effort to try and assassinate President Trump. And thank God he was not some professional hitman assassin, or thank God that he didn't remain undetected. He's sticking his muzzle through the fence. What an idiot. This was not a carefully planned assassination. It's based on the way he was acting. And he's chased off by an agent who sees him, thank goodness, that young agent that Ronald Rowe just described, who begins opening fire on his position. And it's only by the grace of God that there was a female witness that President Trump keeps talking about. I don't know if President Trump has actually met with her, but he seems very impressed by her. He's very grateful to her. You hear him now talk about it on some of these rally stages. I think he talked about it when he was in Long Island this week. President Trump was talking about the woman, and he's so funny too because he talks about he's only a woman would do this, and everyone claps along, But I have a feeling there'd be plenty of men who would step up to say something like that, do what she did. But thank God for her. She's there. She sees this guy make a run for it, jump into his car, and then drive off with his stolen plates. And she has the wherewithal to say, I don't like this. I don't like this. Maybe she heard the gunshots. I'm not clear on all of the events, but we do know that she took pictures. She took pictures. She identified the car. She identified the license plate. She rapidly told the police. They were able to put a bolo out, license plate readers. Boom, they catch this guy. They corner him in a chase on I-95 North. That's a huge deal. And a quick break in that case. So actually, this is yet again another Trump assassination attempt where a lot of things conspired to both save his life and then bring it to a resolution of some kind. You know what I mean? So in Butler, President Trump turns his head. He's looking at the chart. He goes off teleprompter. The Trump supporters are there yelling about what's on the roof. The cops get up there. They scare Thomas Crooks into taking the kind of shot that he probably didn't want to take. He wanted to take one that was more measured and slower and he could breathe and all that stuff. All of this conspires to save Trump's life. And God rest Corey Comparator, whose life was lost that day. He was murdered in cold blood that day as a result of that shooter. But here, yet again, now you have an assassin lying in the bushes. He's stupid enough to be sticking his muzzle out through the fence. You've got a young Secret Service agent who happens to pick it up at this very late moment, begins opening fire to get him to chase him off. And then there's an American citizen just standing by, capturing all of this, able to share it with the cops, and they're able to actually capture this guy and put him into custody. I still have questions about what kind of custody. I'd like to know that this guy's safe in custody, that he's not going to be Jeffrey Epstein, that he's not going to disappear, that he's under suicide watch or whatever. Let's keep this guy. Let's hear from him. The public deserves that. But once again, the events of that day conspire in such a way to not only save President Trump's life, despite the failures. Where are the canines? Where are the drones? Where's the obvious stuff that even some guy who's never planned a security perimeter would think of? Like, don't you think you'd bring a dog out there? Have at least the local cops walk some dogs around the perimeter of the course? Sniff this guy out? Nothing? It's too crazy. And so he stands up there today and he's insisting, Ronald Rowe that is, he said, you know, the Secret Service, we're doing our job. We're just stretched really thin. We got to protect all these people. We're at this very intense posture right now, and what we need is a lot more resources. Really? How about we start with you accounting for the failures we're already staring at, and then not making excuses for more of them occurring? He straight up says that this past Sunday was a success. The redundancies worked. Okay. Why did it get that far? Why did it get that far, Ronald Rowe?